I think of, first of all, the one I'm appearing with Chaplain James Yee next Friday at the Public Library in Murat Kurnaz's case. Chaplain James Yee was the Muslim chaplain at Guantanamo. He was the first Muslim chaplain at Guantanamo, and he was the last Muslim chaplain at Guantanamo. Guantanamo no longer has a Muslim chaplain. And I don't know if you remember reading the papers 3 years ago, and that's why whenever you read about any of these cases, you have to take with them huge skepticism, suspicion, and the idea that our government is dishonest. There were day after day when Chaplain Yee was said was charged with espionage, a death penalty crime, for what he had done at Guantanamo. What he probably did at Guantanamo was complain about the conditions of what was happening. He was put into a brig here in the United States under conditions similar to what Fahad is in. He was chained, he couldn't move, stripped of his rank, 73 days in a prison. Finally, they couldn't prove espionage, then they tried to prove something else, then they tried to prove something else. Ultimately, he is a free man, he was given an honorable discharge, they couldn't prove one thing against Chaplain Yee. So think about Chaplain Yee when you think about Fahad, or think about really the most remarkable one is Brandon Mayfield. Think about, you all remember the bombing in Spain at the Ochoa railroad station. They pick up a Muslim out west who they claim that his fingerprint matched the fingerprint on a backpack left somewhere in Spain on the train or at the station. When they go to the Spanish with the fingerprint, the FBI goes to the Spanish and they say, that fingerprint doesn't match. The FBI insists though on keeping Mayfield in prison under terrible conditions. Ultimately, of course, he was exonerated. They actually had to settle with him for money. And why was he picked up? He was picked up because he was a Muslim and because he prayed in a particular mosque that the FBI was looking at. So when you think about Fahad, think about those cases. Or think about one of our clients, Makar Arar. Makar Arar, a Canadian citizen, taken off the plane at Kennedy Airport, sent to Syria, put into an underground torture facility where he's tortured for 10 months and 10 days at the behest of the United States government. The Canadians eventually settled with him for $9 million Canadian dollars. He is still on the U.S. terrorist list and can't come into the United States. So when you think about Fahad's case, think about the context, think about the cases that have been made, and think about the fact that Fahad is a local case. He's here. He needs the support of all of you and of all of us. And that's the one thing, as I was saying to Sean and others, that I think is going very positively in a way for Fahad. If you can say anything is going positively, it's that his case is actually beginning to reach into a broader community. Not just the community of the Center for Constitutional Rights, but a community of academics who understand who Fahad is and who understand that being outspoken on your ideas is not a crime. It's reached into a community of non-Muslims now, and it's moving in that direction. There's going to be a forum in Brooklyn on May 5th about Fahad's case. So it's beginning to expand. But I can tell you, it's our local, as I see the t-shirt, that says Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo, and then Fahad on it. That's the way to understand the case. And I don't want to repeat when we look at the case itself, but how shocked I was when I looked at what Sean gave you about it. One, the fact that he was in Belmarsh, the notorious British prison, as a Category A prisoner for a year. And then he's taken here to the United States and given special administrative measures, which is essentially a version of what our Guantanamo detainees have. And that Sean and Corin have to both get special security clearances to even be able to meet with their client. All these special rules about approving lawyers. And then you look at the material support statute. And Sean gave the example of taking his fingernails and having them cut and giving them to Al-Qaeda and that would be material support. It's worse case than that. It's not as if Fahad gave those fingernails to Al-Qaeda. It was the man who was living in Fahad's apartment who supposedly did that. And is what I would call, when looking at the factors in Fahad's case, first that he's an outspoken Muslim, and so that's a reason why he gets looked at. Secondly, if you look at these charges, nothing to do with the terrorist act at all, nothing to do with any act of terrorism. And third, you look at what the evidence is. Sean was nice about it because he's the lawyer. I don't have to be nice about it. What you have is a professional witness, essentially, who's being checkerboarded by the United States government and the British government into Muslim trials to try and convict people. And Sean did mention we had that in the communist age. We had professional witnesses who would expose so-called communist after communist after communist, checkerboarding them around. And that's what you have in Fahad's case. And then you have his conditions of imprisonment. I'm familiar, of course, with those at Guantanamo, but that's what you have right here in the city, you know, less than a couple of miles from where we are. So that's how we have to look at Fahad's case. That's why every single one of you, when you leave this room, and of course, it's your responsibility, but of course, it's even as much or more the responsibility of non-Muslims as well, to understand that this country is really right now, for Muslims, is one country, and it's not a very good country. And I want to just say a word about this difference between thought and action. You know, there's a piece of legislation that's passed the House of Representatives, which should be an incredible concern for all of us, and I bring it up because it talks about what it means to have the First Amendment right to speak freely, and what it means then to do something. And it's called the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Protection Act. Think about it. Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act. Who do you think that's aimed at? That's aimed right here. That's aimed at Muslims in this country. And you hear a senator talk about the act, and I'm not going to talk about that act much, except to bring home the point about Fahad and what it means to have thoughts that are different, that are accepted by this government. Senator Harman says the purpose of this act is to intervene before a person crosses the line from radical views to violent behavior. Listen to that. To intervene before a person crosses the line from radical views to violent behavior. What they're saying is this act is about going after people who have radical views. In this case, it's not my radical views about what I think, which is plain radical about Iraq and a lot of other things, but it's what Muslims think, and they're radical, people who are Muslims who have radical views. So I really just want to admonish you that Fahad's case, as he sits there a few miles from us, it's as if we had Guantanamo down the street from us, and that every one of us, if we care, not just about Fahad, but the idea that there be such a thing as authority under law and not above law. Authority, the president, and not simply, and that's what first got me active in these cases, when on November 13th, 2001, the president issued an order that said he could pick up any person anywhere in the world and hold them forever without a trial. They're going to give Fahad a trial, but as Sean has said, you can see what kind of trial that's going to be. So I just want to urge you all, as I myself have become active on Fahad's case in the last month, too late really, considering that he's been down there for a long time. But not too late in the end to get all of us out there supporting Fahad. Thank you.